else's preference? You guys prefer this?
Okay, I don't want to.
Ricardo in the way.
I don't want to hit anything on the way. It worked?
Yeah, it's working.
Oh, awesome.
All right, you tell me, Min. Okay. Hi, guys. My name is Nicole. Oh, no? Okay. We're gonna wait for the thing to start. But in the meantime, I want to congratulate all of you guys because you have made it to the final game dev workshop in the series. Can we clap? To develop your skills in game dev with Mr. Ricardo. Min, tell me. Okay.
Hi, Ari. How you been?
Doing pretty good. Yeah,
Pretty chill.
chilling.
Pretty good.
Not doing anything for work. I have a meeting for work in like 30 minutes.
Nice.
I'm gonna have ChatGPT write a bunch of paper sections. That'll be great.
Pretty good. Awesome. Who skipped class to be here today?
Oh, wow. Nice. Todos disciplinados.
Yeah?
Yes? Okay, awesome. So yet again, guys, my name is Nicole. I'm the Explore PM. This is going to be your last time hearing this if you are only in the game dev cohort. But as always, bear with me for my brief presentation before we start the workshop. So we did explore a little bit differently this time. This is the actual first final workshop of one of the workshop series that we've been testing out. Although they're open to everyone, we had you guys register for these cohort tracks at the very beginning, and we kind of tried to track your progress throughout and see how we can help you guys improve and see if the program is really working for you guys and see how else we can help you guys improve your skills. So we still have one track open, which is our hardware track. Remember, you guys can only sign up for 2 tracks at a time. If you're already signed up to 2, then you're done, but we're gonna repeat all of these workshops again after spring break, so don't worry. What other important information? Today, I need you guys to lock in because if you've attended all 3 of your game dev workshops, you're gonna fill out a survey for me and we're gonna give you guys some cute Game Dev Explorer pins. So first and foremost, can you scroll down? If you guys are interested in joining the hardware one, you can keep going. If you guys are interested in joining the hardware one, you can go ahead and fill out the interest form now. That closes on Sunday at 5 p.m. And then as always, remember that we have our go.fiu.edu/explore hub, and that's where you can find all your live streams, all your Notion docs, all your PowerPoints for these workshops. So if you missed anything, you want to catch up, or if it just doesn't fit in your schedule to go to the workshops, you guys can always go there. By this point, you should have everything downloaded, but in case you don't have any of the materials that you need for this workshop, go do that right now while I'm talking. So now this second one is the most important QR code. I'm trying my best not to curse. I want to say the most effing important QR code of this entire presentation. This is your cohort exit survey. So if you guys remember in the beginning, I had you guys do an entry survey to kind of gauge your comfortability in articulating your skills, in your resume, in your project building skills. And now this is going to be our exit survey for game dev in particular. And it's really important so that we can understand how you guys are improving throughout the program, if there's anything we need to address or modify for next time. So please fill that out now. If you don't fill this out and you went to all the workshops, you are not getting your pins. Don't come crying. I'm telling you now. And you're not gonna get this again unless you're in a different cohort. But if you fill this out once, you don't need to fill it out again for the other cohorts.
And if you say anything negative about me, I know your name and last name, so
This
I have
is
all your
true.
information. No, I'm
Yeah,
kidding.
he will hunt you down. Yeah, no, but feedback is appreciated, and
Please.
this is a bit more extensive than the first one. There's 3 more questions asking you guys how you felt about the Explore program as a whole, and if you have any particular feedback, we'd love to hear it. These programs are for you guys in the end, so anything that you guys think we should do that would help you guys out in future iterations is really, really appreciated. Okay, that everyone got that? I guess you guys are still filling it out, so I'll give you a few seconds. I love threatening people. It's really bad. In hardware, I was like, if you guys steal the components, I will hunt you down. Not yet, because that was just the intro one. You're gonna see it next week, but you don't have to, is you already, I think you're here and hardware, so I already have your entry survey from the beginning of this series. And you won't have to do the exit one either. Just because I don't want to duplicate data. Okay, so once you guys have that filled out, you guys just go ahead and enjoy the workshop for a bit after I go over the upcoming events. And I'll come back probably like when you're done. You said like an hour-ish you're gonna finish going through everything and just ask questions. I'll come back and hand out the pins to the people who have attended all 3 of the workshops and filled out both forms. So in the meantime, I'm just gonna go through some of the upcoming events really quick. Monday at 4 p.m., PG6116, we have our first cohort workshop and our second workshop for hardware. If you guys are interested in this track and you join this track, please come to this one because this is gonna be like the first one where we actually dive into how to do different little projects with Arduinos, so super cool. All this stuff is also on the Discord and on our Explore Hub if you guys need. But then next one, on Tuesday, we have our last web dev workshop where you guys are actually gonna be putting everything together and creating your Spotify visualizer. That's gonna be at 3:30 in VH 131. So similar to this one, if you guys have gone to all the web dev ones and you're interested, then make sure you don't miss this one because you're gonna have your comprehensive project to put on your resumes, your GitHub, stuff like that. I think that's all I had. Thank you guys. I'm gonna hand it over to Ricardo. Thank you.
Do you guys need a few more minutes for the survey? Who's still doing the survey? Okay, I'll give it a few. But
Can you scroll back up just really quick to the survey so that one person can? Yeah, that exit survey.
Huh? Yes, go on.
Really quick, is there anyone that I haven't checked in yet?
So what I just did through here?
So open, go to projects. Open it. It shows that you don't have the version yet. Yeah. Yeah, first you have to open it here, and then it's gonna ask you to install it. You don't have to select too much. The least you select, the better. So you have Visual Studios already, right? So unselect that and click continue. See, maybe that's a little bit faster. All right. For those, I see a couple. Yes.
Where do we go to download the project to like catch up?
Here. So for those, because I see a couple new faces. Who's here for the first time? 1, 2, 3. 3? Okay. Right. For that, go to this link for me. This link is going to take you to this Notion. And then once you are here, this is your updated, the question you were asking me, this is your updated project. This is a Google Drive link. Just click on it and download it so you're caught up to this point. Mostly today's workshop is going to be pretty chill. We're not going to do anything too crazy. I think the last workshop we coded the whole entire 2 hours. So today I'll try to just add minimal stuff here and there and try to make it as fun as possible. But you do need this. So try to have that done, okay? Before I start, I usually like to, bring up a game, a subject, something successful so I get engaged with you guys. Today, I couldn't think of anything that I could bring you guys interesting. But on my way here, my car wouldn't unlock. And I would try to make this analogy work as best as possible as I could. So stay with me, okay? Who has gone to ShawHacks before? Really? I would think everyone. Okay, good enough. For those of you that have gone to ShawHacks before, you know the deadline for submission, it's 11 a.m. on Sunday, right? Right? What happens if you try to submit at 11:05 to that post? I'm sorry? It won't let you, right? Even if you have the best project, even if you made the best, insanely super duper cool project, if it's 11:05, they don't allow you to upload your project. So, I think with the lights off you can't see it, but my car keys run out of batteries, right? And I saw a video that you had to open it and replace the battery, right? So I follow the instructions. I promise you, the instructions literally the same, car fob, everything the same, but mine wouldn't open. At that point, I needed to go and get in my car and do my stuff, daily stuff that we all have to do, right? So what do I want to bring up? I had a deadline, like I said in the first workshop. So my deadline is I needed to change the battery in this in order for me to continue along with my day, right? Now, the problem that I did is, you can't really see it, but I messed up my entire key. I don't want to curse, but I messed up my entire key. So it's kind of broken, and it's halfway open, right? So I jammed my screwdriver, and I kind of broke it. But I was able to continue with my day. Why do I want to bring this up? This just came up to me, so stay with me. Deadlines are super important. If you submit at 11:05, it doesn't matter if you fix the key fob perfect. It doesn't matter. At that point, you're not part of the competition anymore. Deadlines are important. Why do you think that all these games release with a bunch of bugs? And not just games, apps, websites, everything, because you have a deadline. The company invested in marketing and everything for a certain day. We hear all of these delays now, every game, everything gets delays. That hurts the company. Because best example I can give you guys, we're meeting today, Thursday at 4 p.m., right? If I say that we have a workshop today at 4 p.m., and I don't show at 4 p.m., I decided to show up tomorrow at 6 p.m., but all of you guys have plans for your Friday because you don't want to be in school on a Friday. Why is this thing off? Because you don't want to be in school on a Friday, then none of you are showing up to the workshop. Why? Because my deadline, the set time that we agreed on, was Thursday, not Friday. So now no one's going to be at the workshop. So deadlines are very, very important, super important. Actually, the most important part of a project. Meet the deadlines. Does that make sense? Right? Okay, awesome. For those of you that don't have the project, is this taking too long to download? Yeah, right? Does it say more or less how long? No? Anybody else? No? Okay. All right. Let's go to Unity. Let's open our player scripts. We're first going to test something out. I don't know if you guys remember, before we left, we had a problem with the rotation of our camera, right? Do you guys remember how you would walk and the camera wouldn't rotate? Was anybody able to look at that code and try to see what the problem was? No? Nobody? Who wants to give it a shot? Let's look at the code real quick. Remember, there's no wrong answers. Today, I want to treat it like if we're a studio. We're all working together. We're all trying to figure an issue, right? Let's try to figure out this problem. All right, you guys remember this long line of code, right? That looks super complex and It doesn't make a lot of sense. So our issue is here. We all agree? Rotating our player, right? If we go to Unity and we click play, and we go forwards and backwards and left and right, it works, right? This is why debugging is so important. You have to know where your error is first in order for you to be able to fix it. As long as I'm not rotating anything in my camera, it works perfectly fine, right? So when does the issue begin? The issue begins whenever I start turning. Now forward is not forward anymore, right? Now it's when the issue begins. I'm going forward, but my player is not looking forward. It is going forward, but it's not looking forward, right? Now that we know where the issue is, let's look back to our code. What's this code doing? This code is getting our player model. Remember, our player model is one thing, and a rigid body that has the physics is something else. Our rigid body is not rotating, right? Our player is rotating, not the actual object of our player. So we're getting this player model, and we're not changing the position, so that's good, but we're changing the rotation. The rotation is the current rotation that we have now. So if I'm rotating here, I'm gonna pass this first. Then I'm modifying it by a function called quotation.Euler. Euler, it's basically when we go to Unity, and we have up here in the rotation, or X, Y, and Z, that's basically where it says rotation, not position, the second one from the top bottom, right? Where it says rotation, X, Y, and Z, that's basically what we're passing. So let's go back to Visual Studios for a second so we can all understand. We're passing the rotation that we have, and we're modifying that rotation times 0, 0, 0. 0, 0, 0 means forward, right? We're not rotating. If I'm like this, I'm 90 degrees. If I'm like this, I'm negative 90. If I'm like this, I'm 180. Does that make sense? Yes? Any questions? You guys want me to explain it again? I want you guys to interact with me, please. Am I making sense? Yes. Okay. So, in this case, since I'm moving forward, I'm passing at 0, 0, 0. In this case, S, we're going backwards. So I'm passing 180 because I'm looking backwards, right? Now the problem that this has is this is not getting the rotation from our camera. Remember, a rotation has to be subjective to where our camera is looking at. This is always going to be looking backwards in a 3D space, implying if I'm here and I have a camera behind me and I start walking forward, this is always going to be 0, 0, and 0 forward, for example. When I start rotating this way, 0 is still going to be this way, right? So instead, what I have to do is get the rotation of my camera and use that so I can have a variable. Does that make sense? It's a little confusing, but does it make sense? Yes.
So wait, are you aligning the camera with the character where it's facing?
Yes, because the camera and the player are inside of an object called player. Player is the parent, then it's player model, then it's the camera. If I'm going forward, my forward is not the forward of the universe. Maybe forward for the universe is this way, but my player might be looking this way, implying my forward, it's this path, not this path. And what this is saying is that 0, 0, 0, it's always going to be in this direction. So our code is correct, but the only thing that we need to add is we have to get the factor of our camera. So if my camera is looking this way, I just use that and add this, and I have my camera 0, 0, 0 forward of my camera. Does that make sense? Again, the syntax is simple, but all the logic behind game dev is super complex. So I try to break it down as much as possible, but I know the logic is confusing. So I'll explain it many, many times. Yes.
How would you get the Euler for the camera's rotation?
Say that again, please.
How would you get the Euler for the camera's rotation?
So Euler gives you, for example, let's say we want an easier example. It will be 90 degrees because 90 is an easier number. So let's say 90, right? This one right here. When we're walking right, we want to make sure that our player is looking right of the camera, not the universe. So if I'm here, but my camera is looking here, my right to my camera, it's here, not here like the universe says. So the only thing this line of code needs, it's my rotation of the camera. That's it. And multiply or add. Probably add. And add it times the rotation of the camera. And that's it. If we have the rotation of my camera, if my camera is currently rotating 45 degrees, and I just add that times plus 90, it's going to give me my camera that right. And that's it. It fixes the problem. You get what I'm saying?
No, I understand what you're saying. I'm asking, like, how would you get the rotation of the camera?
Camera, that rotation. Transform that rotation. And then you add that. That's your variable right there. Camera that transform that rotation, plus your Euler 90, and you fix the code. Does that make sense? All right, so let's write it real quick so we can see it working. All right. Everyone got that, right? Okay. Right, so all we have to do is we have a variable up here called camera parent, right? And that's all we gotta get. So get camera parent and copy it. And add it or do we multiply it? I think you guys say add? We add. Yeah, because the rotation times, I don't know, I think it's multiply, but we could do add. So after the comment here, just go here and just add camera parent plus, see, no, it's multiplying. You can, that transform, that rotation. See if we could add. I don't think we could add, but yeah, you can't add to vectors. You can only multiply. So that should be the error. Let's see if it says. Right, yeah, you can't add to quaternions or vectors. So it has to be multiplied. Right. So if we add that, that should fix our problem, I think. So let's just add that to all of our script. Add it down here. Add it down here, and add it down here as well. Careful with the position of where you add that line of code. If you added one line lower or something like, or maybe you wrote it different from me, it's after the comma that your quaternion lerp starts. Is anybody having errors? No? Okay, so now we can save that and go back to Unity. And if what I said is correct, we should click play. And now, if we rotate, forward is that way, see? So now, forward is always going to be here. Forward is going to be here. Forward is going to be here. And then left, right, back, forward. It's always going to be looking in the right direction. Everyone get that? Yes? Are you saying yes so I can move on? Fair enough. Okay. Right, so now that we have that, we want to build a shooting script. So we have an enemy, and whenever we get close to our enemy, he'll start chasing us and then also targeting us, right? There we go. So let's go back to our script. And let's build a projectile script. Okay. We could do it on a different script or we could do it on the same one. Either way, it's the same thing. I just like having one script that I can control everything just in case I need to like modify. I don't know, it's just a lot simpler to do one big script. But you can do it whichever one you method you prefer. Do you guys have an idea how to approach this? It's gonna be basically the same, almost the same thing as the NPC, yes.
Wait, so you're asking, like, how do we go about, like, shooting?
Right.
First you need to, like, have a
Right. Step number 1, getting a key. Okay. Input that get key.
To like have spawning the ball. So you have to
Spawn the. Okay.
yeah.
You could do 2 approaches. You could do, which I prefer the approach of physics, which is you create a rigid body of a ball and you just shoot it, or you could do a raycast. Raycast is not as fun. A raycast is basically an imaginary line. So you could do those 2 approaches. Raycasts are not fun at all, so we're not gonna do raycast. But yeah, you would create a rigid body and then give it a specific position, right? Everyone agrees? Anybody want to add anything to that? Anybody want to make it different? Yes. You gotta give it velocity. So far, you guys have said everything step by step. First, you need to get your input. Second, you need to have a position where you're creating the specific object or projectile you're shooting, and then you gotta give it velocity. Literally in that same order. We're creating the specific projectile with a function called instantiate, which is the same function that we use for an NPC, right? So input, instantiate, give it a position, and then add force. That's basically our entire script, right? Does that make sense? So I want to talk. Okay, so input first. So let's code it here. Right, let's just go at the bottom. Yeah, let's just do it at the bottom. You could do projectile script, and then let's get our input first. So input dot get key. You guys remember the difference between get key? Don't read what it says. You guys remember the difference?
If you press it, that's when you just press it once, I believe.
Right.
And then the key down is
You know what? I think you're wrong.
Is it the other?
But
I always confuse
I always confuse it too. But I don't know if you're right or wrong. Hold on. Key down. Right. So key down is when you press it. Key up is when you let go, and then key is when you leave it pressed. Right. Right. It's super confusing. I think key should have been when you press it once, because key down literally implies you leaving the key down, but they just went for a different approach, I guess. All right, so do we want to make it automatic, or do we want to make it that you have to press every single time? Automatic? Raise your hand for automatic. You're like that meme. Why not both? We could definitely do both. It's gonna be a slightly longer code, but we could definitely do. You guys want to see? Okay, automatic. Raise your hand. All right, single shot. Raise your hand. Okay, single shot's winning so far, and they're both. Okay, we'll do single shot. Sorry. Okay, so let's do get key down. And then our key, you could put anything, but I think it's better to put key code .mouse 0. So depending on how crazy your mouse is, but 0 is left, 1 is right, and then 2 should be the middle. 3, 4, 5, 6, I have no clue. But so we'll go with 0, so it's a left click. And then that's it. Now we have step 1, we have our input, right? Our step 2 was, what was our step 2? It's create it? Or create it or the position? Those are 2 different things. Create first and then position. Okay. So we have to use a formula called instantiate. I always forget how to write this. Instantiate, there you go. Now, instantiate takes a bunch of parameters. The parameter we're going to use is, you have to be very careful how you write instantiate, because if you add an extra parameter, it'll be a completely different formula. It'll be the parent or child, or it's very different. So we're going to use, this one. So we're gonna use, again, make sure to put it in the right order. We're gonna use this one, which is number 5 out of 11. We're gonna pass our object that we're instantiating. Then we're gonna pass a vector 3, which is a position. And then we're gonna pass a quotandem, which is a rotation, right? So we're gonna create our object, pass the position where we're gonna create it, and the rotation of where we're gonna create it. If you add one more, it's gonna be a different formula. I can't stress that enough. See, if you add one extra transform or you flip them, it's gonna be the child of another object and it's gonna create a bunch of chaos, right? So just make sure that you add it in the right order, right? So we go back, it's gonna be object, position, and rotation. What do we need in this case? Do we have variables for this? We don't, right? So we gotta, let's just comment that out for now. Let's go up. And our variables, we're gonna create a public game object and then call it projectile. And what else do we need to be able to run the formula? Yeah, we need a public float projectile speed, we can call it. And then you were saying? No, you're right, but what else do we need? We need something else. You can't question yourself. Huh? Yes and no. I'm going to show you a different approach for deleting. But we do need delete just after the script. What else do we need for this? I mean, we have, okay, if we don't need anything else, then let's just start creating.
No, we need the position, I know that, but we also need the rotation.
I don't know, you tell me. All right, so I'm going to start doing the function, scroll down, and then this takes, what are the parameters? We need the object, position, and rotation. Okay, so what we're instantiating is projectile, then comma. What do we do for position? We don't have a position, right? So we gotta create another variable, and let's make it a transform, public transform. And then what was that?
Projectile spawn.
Exactly, projectile spawn. Right, so that's gonna be the spawn position. Did I write that correctly? I think so. That's gonna be the position. Just copy that and scroll all the way down, and then you're gonna put projectile spawn dot position and projectile spawn dot rotation. Right? So input, instantiating. What this does is creates an object from your folder, not from your 3D space. It creates from the folder of the game. It creates that file, that object, or whatever it is, and it puts it on the scene. Where does it put it? In the position that you give it, right? So that's all we're doing so far. Everyone good here so far? Yeah. Okay. So what's after this? The velocity, right? How do we, let's see if you guys remember the MPC. How do we modify the velocity? To get to the velocity, we need to get to the rigid body, right? Because that's what gives us physics. How do we get to the rigid body? It already has that component. But how do we access it? You're very close. Keep throwing ideas. Come on, you guys are very close. How do we access? We just created this object. How do we access whatever is in this object?
Projectile dot rigid body or something.
Right, but before that, we need to make this an object, right? So this is just something that we're throwing out there. But we need it as an object to then get to the rigid body, to then modify the rigid body. So it's kind of like this weird process that we have to do, right? So all we're doing is go back here and put game object, make sure it's capital, and then projectile equals that, right? Make sure it's not the same name. If you put projectile, it could throw an error. It's going to throw an error. So we have a reference already of this object that we're building, right? So now that we have that, we need the rigid body, right? So we need to go here, rigid body, rig, call it whatever you want, equals, who wants to complete this line of code? That get component, rigid body. So everyone here so far good? So what do? We got our input, then we're instantiating. We turn this into an object so we can have access. Once we turn it into an object, we can do whatever we want with our object, right? We have this object here, and then with the fact that we have an object, we can now access the rigid body. So now we're creating another object for the rigid body and accessing here. If this has a body, this is gonna be good. But we don't wanna count on it. You just never know, right? So just in case, we're gonna throw an if statement here before we add our velocity, because if we try to access something and it's not there, it's not gonna matter. But if we try to modify something that is null, it's gonna throw an error, right? So we can't just say rig that add force and then give it 999, for example. We can't just say that, because if we do that and for some reason this line throws an error, this is gonna crash your game. And this happens in everything that you do, whether it's an application, whether it's a website, whatever it is. If you don't, that's your try and catch. Who has used try and catch before? Right. All of us should have our hands, well, not everyone's taking advanced programming, but try and catch is very important, because you have to make sure that your code is not going to throw an error. If it does, then you catch it as an exception and you handle it after. But if you just think that nothing's going to go wrong, it's going to throw an error, and at this point, it's not just going to throw an error, it's going to crash. Your game, your website, your app, whatever it is, it'll crash, 100%, right? So we just want to make sure first that it is not null. So look how simple. Rig is not equal to null. There you go. Now with this little line of code, your code is never going to crash, right? At this point, nothing can crash. Impossible. Because that won't run if it's null. So you're good. So let's use add force. Make sure to use the right rig, not projectile, okay? Because projectile is a game object. Rig is a rigid body, so we need to use rig. We're not gonna go over everything, but there's many different approaches that we could take. There's add force, there's relative force, I have no clue what that is. There's torque, which is different. Again, play test each one of them and see what works better for you. There's also velocity. So velocity is usually, add force, it'll basically replicate pushing something. So like for example, if something were to be here and I would just push it, it'll be that relative force that it'll get little by little increase. Velocity will be instant. So like for example, the difference is velocity, if I just give it, 50, it'll be going instant 50. And I just give it 0, it'll be 0. Add force would sort of increase, little dynamically, right? So for that, let's just add force now. I think add force would probably be better for what we're using. Add force. And then we don't want to make this static, right? We want to make it dynamic so we can modify it. So what was the variable that we put? Projectile speed. Okay. What's the problem here? The problem is that add force, yes?
I was gonna say,
Don't read. Do not read. I'm kidding.
I'm not reading. Add force, doesn't it like add the speed of the force of it coming out, right?
Right.
But it's on the update function, so it's gonna do that like really fast.
Oh yeah, that's very smart. That's something I brought up in the first workshop. Yeah, you don't want to add force in the update. We're gonna do it anyways, but you don't want to do it. But yeah, that's one of the issues I didn't even think of. Anything with physics, again, I'll rephrase back to the first workshop. But anything with physics, you want to add in the fixed update. That overcomplicates our code. So for the sake of learning how to do this, it's just we're not gonna take that approach. But the update would run very different from the fixed update. Reason this is wrong is because this requires a vector 3. Add force needs 3 vectors. It needs a 3D vector in order to know which direction you're sending that, right? So it's not just, okay, add 999. Yeah, but in what direction? That could be this way, forward, whatever, right? So what do we think is zero, and my player is rotating 45 degrees, if I use the rotation of the object that I just created, it's gonna go 0, 0, 0, which implying it's gonna go this way, right? But if I'm rotating 45 degrees, I want it to go here forward, right? So our spawn, which is somewhere here, where is our spawn position? It's gonna be a child of our player. Therefore, it'll have the rotation of our player. So all we have to do is get the spawn position, that forward, and multiply it times the projectile speed, and we just finish that, right? And we don't have to create another variable. So let's go here and add projectile spawn. Was that a transform? I think it was, right? That position? That position? No, that forward. And then multiply it times projectile speed. Right. You guys remember what that forward was, right? That forward is basically, it gets the location of where you are, and that forward is +1 in whatever rotation you are. Plus forward will always be in front of whatever that is. So we get this that forward, because we want to shoot forward, and multiply it times whatever speed we want. Good here so far? Questions? You guys want me to go slower, faster? Slower? Who says slower? Slower? You want me to re-explain something else? You want me to re-explain? I don't mind re-explaining. Right, so spawn that forward, it's basically, it's gonna be, if you were to run this in the console, it'll be 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, or 1, 0, 0. What that means is whatever position we are, it'll be 1 in whatever axis that is. So that forward is a function that we could use to always get, we have that forward and that right. So we could get the forward position and the right position of any object that we have control of. In this case, we have our spawn position, that forward, it's gonna be the velocity that we're gonna give it, and we're gonna multiply that times projectile speed. So if forward is in the x-axis and x is forward, if x is 1 and our projectile speed, it's, I don't know, 100, it's gonna be 100 times 1, which will be 100 speed forward, in the direction forward. And it'll be 0, 0 in the other axis. Because if you have an object and you give it a force in, remember, it's a 3-dimensional space. In 3D space, you need to give it a place to go. So if you give it in your x, your y, and your z axis, so your object is gonna go crazy all over the place, right? But you gotta give it in one specific axis. And that's what that forward gives us. That forward gives, okay, this position, that forward, 1 is in the x-axis. Multiply it times this, and that'll be the speed of whatever you're looking at forward, right? Good? Okay. So, if we save that, we go back and do we need to reference something? Okay, yes. So we need a couple different things. We need, okay. I think we created a prefab projectile. Here we go, which is the same one the NPC is shooting, right? So you're not gonna do what I just did. You're not gonna drag and drop it into your scene. Delete that, okay? Click on your player, go down here, and where it says projectile, drag and drop it from your project, right? From your project. From your project. Where are you gonna drag and drop it from? Right. What's the difference between dragging it from the project and dragging it from your scene? Who wants to guess? What is this object here in my scene? What is this? Yes.
Were you saying something that it's different from the project?
Very different.
Like that?
Give it a shot. Come on, somebody give it a shot. Give it a shot. Difference.
You're going to spawn projectile while if we take it from the project, we have like infinite ammo.
Right. Because anything that you have here in your project files, you're gonna have access to it on your game. Anything in your scene, it's local. So whatever, if I were to pass from my scene, from here to this, let's go to my player, and I'm just gonna I'm gonna drag and drop the one I had on my scene, right? And that's it, it's gonna replace. What's gonna happen? It's probably gonna crash. Yeah, it doesn't even work, right? I don't even know what it did, it just disappeared. Why? Because we're using a local variable. Think of it as a variable. We're using something locally in our scene to instantiate. When you instantiate, it has to be from your project. You're creating an object. You're creating something from here, implementing it into your scene. So very important, grab it from here. Don't grab it from your scene. Otherwise, it won't work. So let's delete that. We don't need that. And let's go to our player and drag and drop. Projectile speed, just modify it to anything that you want. Go back to our player, and we have to give it our projectile spawn position, right? So in here, just right click on it. You can do it 2 different ways, 3D object and put a cube. I like using a cube, so that way I can visualize it, but you can just create an empty object and just put it wherever you want. But we put it here, and let's call it spawn position, right? And then just move it along so it's in the position that you want it to spawn, which in this case will be in front of our little ray gun. Okay. Put it somewhere here. You can, again, just depends how picky you want to be, but let's just put it somewhere there. This is really difficult to do with in a laptop without a mouse. So once you're done, remove all of this because you don't need any of this at this point, right? So we're gonna get a box collider. We don't need that. Remove it. The least amount of things you have, the better. I don't remember how to. I don't remember how to pull it out, but there is a option here in Unity that you could get something called draw calls. Who knows what a draw call is? Right, so draw calls are the more objects you have in your scene, the slower your game's gonna run. So that's why you see in games that you see a building and it's like super highly detailed, but the back of the building is like invisible, right? Or, the most faces that you can remove from an object the more efficient it's gonna run, right? Especially on lower specs. Like for example, the Oculus Quest to me is magic. We about a year ago, I went to Miami Hack Week, and I built a VR tennis game. And I was debugging in my computer. And in my head, I'm like, well, I gotta make this fairly efficient because it's running on the Quest 3. But I've seen Quest 3 games, so I know it could handle a couple things. But I just had literally a little house. It was a little backyard with a couple trees, and there was tennis, you could play, whatever, nice physics and everything. As soon as I put that into the VR headset, it wouldn't run at all. Not even 1 FPS. It just wouldn't work, right? So then the only way that worked is I removed everything. And it was just an empty plane with a net, and you could play, right? So draw calls are super important. You sort of have to understand that efficiency is very important. You can't just have a big open world RPG that's massive. It won't, right? So this is a bad example because, I mean, one face is not gonna do anything, but I just wanna bring that up while I'm here, yes.
I also think it's important for optimization as well, that a lot of games tend to render textures in low detail when it's farther away.
Yeah, that's called LODs. And so the way you approach optimizing your game, again, this is a little out of the topic, but it's fine. The way you optimize your games is 2 different ways. LODs, which is level of detail, and occlusion cooling. So LODs are basically, it'll detect the distance of your player, and depending on your distance, it'll change from low resolution to higher resolution. Sometimes you have 3, 4 LODs, so you'll have like a 128, 256, 512, and then full HD, depending on how close you are, right? And then your occlusion cooling, it's basically whatever your camera sees, that's what gets rendered. Everything that the camera doesn't see is not being rendered at the moment. So everything is invisible until your player rotates and sees it, right? How you handle those is, I don't have it up here, but how you handle those is completely up to you and completely up to your map. You have to be careful how you switch that up, because if you have a map that has too many open areas, or depending on how the map is set up, you're not gonna be able to have the same settings. If you, for example, if you put your render distance not to be that long, but you have a really big open map, it's gonna look ugly because you're gonna be able to see the end of the map. So just, you have to tweak with the settings. All right, so let's remove this mesh because we don't need that. Now we have the position, go back to our player, and we're gonna pass our spawn position. Now we have everything referenced, right? So we can click play, and hopefully it works. I don't know if it will, but it will. Right, now if I click, what the hell? Okay, let's add a little bit more force. Interesting. Okay. Can anybody tell me what the issue is? Yes.
Can you shoot?
Yeah, that's very important. Number 1, debug, right? So our player is looking this way, and it's coming right. So.
Yeah, so it's just shooting in one direction.
Right.
No way to change it. I think you can fix that, but having the direction come up except the camera's rotation
No.
or the player.
We already have that worked out. The issue is here. I'll give you that as a hint. You had your hand up? Come on. Say something wrong. It's fine.
If you spam it too fast, it'll create a lot of objects that will lag the game.
No. We have to fix the reason why we're here, and it's supposed to shoot in the gun forward, not behind the player. Why is it shooting behind the player? It's something super simple that I completely overlooked. Yes.
The spawn position should be a child of the camera parent, or imagine if you wanted to shoot from the camera.
You're almost right.
The player model.
There you go. Of course. That has to be a child of the player model. Otherwise, it's just going to be randomly, it's going to be in the same static position, right? Because the player doesn't move. We need it in our gun. Therefore, we needed to be a child of the player model. That's it. Simple as that. I didn't even, again, I didn't even realize that was an issue. So put it here, drag and drop it in there. And now, if we click play, hierarchy is very important. Hierarchy is very, very important. The order that you have everything, it's gonna matter, right? So now, if we rotate, and now we just needed to give it a little more push, just so you know. So let's do 800. There you go. So let's say you wanted to do it, I don't know, a little bit higher. You could modify and add a little bit of force a little bit higher, and it'll be a little more curved. Again, how fancy, how detailed you want to make it, it's up to you. You want to make it a little bit faster, put this value a little bit higher, and then it'll go a little bit faster. Again, it'll depend. Depends on you, right? So you said when we were building it, how do we delete it? And I think we actually did that in the last, I didn't even know we did it, but we have so what's the problem now? We don't have a garbage collector. If we just start, let me disable this object here. I'm gonna disable this script, and I'm gonna just click play. If we just start shooting, you see an issue over there? If you play long enough, this is gonna crash your game, right? So we don't have a garbage collector. So we need a script that takes care of, how many things we're spawning and deleting them, right? So let's just go back to our script because we did that when we were doing our NPC, but super simple. All we're doing is basically adding a float, a timer, and that timer, we're instantiating this object. This object already has this script that takes care of deleting it, right? So we add this timer, and in our update, we subtract it by time, that delta time, which is seconds. And once that gets to 0, destroy the object, right? Super simple. So all we're doing here is, all right, this is subtracting. Once it gets to 0, it'll delete. And if we go back to our object, we have it set to 5 seconds. So if we put that to 10, 15, 20, whatever that is, that's the amount of seconds it'll take for it to get destroyed. So if we go and click play, which you guys should have that script already. You guys should have that script already, because we did that for the NPC. We're just reusing the same one, right? So we're creating all of them, and within 5 seconds, all of them should get destroyed. There you go, in the same order that they were created, right? Okay. Now, what else do we need for this script? Nicole's probably wanting to kill me. Nicole, you want to give all the pins? I know I said.
No, you keep talking.
I said 1 hour. It's 5. You sure?
No, you're fine. My script wasn't working, so I'm going to do it manually. So take your time.
All right.
Anyone who has to leave early, then you know that you attended all the workshops. Just come see me before you leave.
Okay. So, what are we missing? I mean, we're creating a game mode, right? So we have our NPC, and we have our player. If we get close to our NPC gets close to us, and it'll try to shoot us, right? And we could do the same thing too. But what's happening here? Yes?
You can't lose.
Exactly. You can't do anything. You have your hand up? Right, you can't do anything, right? So let's just add so we could have an actual game mode. By the way, I don't like this. You see how it's going through us? We could fix that really quickly. So let's try to fix that first so it doesn't look as ugly. Okay, so what's the problem here? Again, I want to treat it like a studio. We have an issue and we fix it. Yes?
The problem is that there's no collision between me and the
Yeah, but collision will probably not do the trick. Because if they collide, it's still going to be colliding with you. You get what I'm saying? It's still going to look a little dirty. Like if you have somebody coming towards you, they're not going to keep running towards you once they're in front of you. You know? So even if they collide, it's still going to look weird.
Is that like, you have them walk to us for a certain distance, but we don't have a distance for them to stop?
Right. That's our fix. We are going, once we're close, we're gonna make sure that we don't get to a certain distance. So let's just say, I don't know, 2 or 3, the distance from it, if it's 2 or 3, at that point we're not running towards the player anymore, right? And we'll just stop. Keep attacking, but we'll just stop. So let's go and see how we can implement that. Let's go to our enemy script and open the script. All right, how do we handle that? When do we have access to the player? Because remember, the player is not a variable. When do we have access to the player? Do we have access to the player on our update? Do we have access to the player on exit or on trigger stay? Who wants to guess? Come on. Where do we have access to the player? How do we know that we're chasing the player? On trigger stay, right? Because our trigger stay checks, all right, is this layer 9, which layer 9 is our player? Is this our player? Yes. Therefore, we're following the player, right? What's the player? Your other object. Your other, that gives you access to the player. So now that we know that here, if it's layer 9, in here, we have our player, right? So how do we start approaching this issue? We know that other is player. Because we are inside of our trigger, and inside of that other, which is our collider, is layer 9, which is player. Therefore, in here, we have player. Now what? This is similar to our instantiating issue. Yes? Don't let me throw you off.
What I think is you get the other player's position,
Right.
and you like subtract it from yours, and
Right.
it's like 3, for example, then you stop.
Exactly. So we're gonna, we need to make sure that we are setting our integer to 1, which 1 means our animator, 1 means that we're running. We don't want it to run, right? We want it to set it to 0 when it's at a certain length, a certain distance. So let's just make a object here, and how do we start approaching this? Let's just create an if statement and say if other dot game object dot okay, actually no. If vector 3, which is to answer your question, how do you get the distance between 2 objects? You get vector 3 dot distance. This is a function super useful, and it gets the position of 2 objects, and it brings back, so it gets vector A and vector B, and it returns the distance. So we could use this perfect in an if statement. We could check if it's 4, if it's 3, hey, don't follow the player anymore, right? So distance, and then the first distance we're gonna check is other dot game object dot transform dot position. So all I'm doing here is getting the position of the player. It might seem complex because I'm accessing like 3 different functions, but again, all I'm doing is I'm opening doors. It's not complex. It's just opening doors. My dot operator is just opening another door. I'm currently in other. Other, it's a collider. From a collider to an object, to a game object, the dot operator is a door. I just go into my game object, right? From game object to my transform, which is the only way that I could get my position, another door. And at that point, from my transform to my position, another door, I already have my position, right? So we go here and comma, and then now we need to pass our position, so the NPC position, right? Simple, we just put this, that transform, that position, right? And this returns, like we read in the top, it returns a float or an integer, one of the two. It returns a variable, and that variable we're gonna check if it's X amount. So let's just put if is less than, how do we go for, 3, 4? If it's less than 4, 3, let's just go with 3. Okay, so inside of this if statement, it's gonna run whatever we put if it's less than 3. So that means we are really close to the player, right? So let's just put, if we are really close to the player, let's just copy this whole line here. We don't want it to run anymore, right? So we want to set this to 0, not equals 0. And we want to get this and put it in here, right? So all I did so far is I just moved whatever I had outside and put it inside of my if statement, right? So if we are close to the player, we're gonna be idling, we're not gonna be running anymore, and we're gonna modify our position. The destination is not gonna be the player anymore because we don't want it to go towards the player. So all we're gonna have to do is just put this, right? Because we don't want it to move anymore. We just wanna say, hey, stay where you are. Your current position, it's where you are. Don't move anymore, right? Any questions here so far? Questions? No? Okay. What do I put in my else? What goes in the else statement? Right, right? So if we're saying, hey, don't run once you get close to the player and don't move, we have to check. If that's not true, then we have to, hey, you got to go follow the player, right? So in other words, if it's less than 3, do this. If it's not less than 3, then keep following the player. So we'll just put, copy this, so we don't have to write it again. And then it'll be this set destination, and the destination, let's just delete it so we could do it from scratch so it's easier to understand. What's the destination here? Right, other dot game object dot transform dot position, right? Again, this sounds very complex. Does it sound? Raise your hand if it sounds complex. Again, guys, it's totally fine. Does it sound complex? Okay. It seems complex, but it is not. I promise you, it is not. It's just the logic and the syntax behind it. It's a little funky. Once you see it a couple times, it's all the same thing, I promise you. Every single game is built the same way. You're gonna write this code. I don't have any notes. I've written this like maybe 2,000 times. It's the same logic for everything. So I know it is a lot of information now, but I promise you, it is very simple. All this is doing is, I have an if statement up there. My if statement is checking, hey, is my current position less than 3? Yes. Then we're gonna go, our animator, instead of running, it's gonna be idling, and our destination is gonna be this, where I currently am, right? Else, if my position is not less than 3, then I gotta keep following the player. That means the player moved. If it's not, then I'm gonna get this player and set the destination to whatever the player is moving at this point. And the state of the animator is gonna be 1. So we're gonna go back to running. So we could see it more clear. Let's just save this real quick. Go back to Unity. Let's go back to our animator. Remember this? A lot of you, raise your hand again if you were not in the first workshop. I'm sorry, if this is your first workshop. Right, okay. So a few of you, you haven't seen the animator that we created. So the animator just goes from state to state. All this is doing is we're idling and then we're running. We have a variable called state, which is up here, and that state goes from 0 to 1. I'm just recapping. When it goes from 0 to 1, it's running. We know by the transition that we have here, this is our condition. If state, condition right there, equals 1, we're running. The transition, if it equals 0, we're idling. So if we could get that again with our code, 0, because we're idling, we're not following the player anymore, we're not moving. 1, we're still chasing the player, right? So Let's test it out in Unity real quick.
Ricardo, do you want to take a quick break?
Yes.
Like a few minutes so I can give you that?
Yeah, 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Huh?
You let me know.
Right, so now, if we get close to our enemy, please work. It's gonna get close to us and then it'll stop. See? That's our if statement right there. And it's kind of twitching, I don't know why, but we'll figure that out later. So it's checking, hey, our distance is less than 3. We can't move anymore, we're idling. If we move back, it'll default to the other if statement. That it's not moving because we're outside of the trigger at this point. You see the difference? We're outside of the trigger. Therefore, we have no player. We're not moving anywhere. As soon as we go into contact with the trigger, which should be somewhere here, then it's following us, then it's less than 3. Make sense? Good? Okay. Take over, Nicole.
Okay, I guess I'll turn the lights on just for a second and close our eyes. So honestly, it seems like everyone who was here today, who filled out that exit form at least, has been here for the rest of the 3 workshops, so this is gonna be really nice. I think everyone's gonna get a pin. I'm gonna have you guys come up because I don't have everyone's names memorized. And there's 3 people who didn't fill out the entry survey. I'm gonna give you guys the pins anyway to be nice. But for next time, if you're gonna do any cohorts after spring break, please make sure to fill those out because that's how we get metrics on how to actually improve the program for you guys. Okay, so Juan Diaz. I don't know this name. Okay, right here. By the way, there's like a little blue film on them. They're not ugly, I promise. You just peel off the blue film and then they're cute. Okay. George Alvarez? Yeah. Yeah, you want to just
Let's see.